Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Pulsar show with a new guest, Jess Furman.
Hi, everybody.
Fantastic. Hello.
So,
Hi.
maybe Jess, what do you do? Let's start like this. Who are you? What do you do?
All right. Gosh, that's a loaded question. So I'm based out of Los Angeles. I'm a music executive, a creative executive. I own a custom house called Sound Revolver that I started about 10, 12 years ago. I've personally scored, composed, produced, written for over hundreds of TV shows, commercials, ads, video games, interactive exhibits. Some of the bigger shows you might know are Alvin the Chipmunks, Trolls, lots of spinoffs of My Little Pony in the last couple of years, a lot of animation projects,
Ooh.
at least in the last couple of years. And I built that into a business. And in the last 3 years, I started a division for Big Noise Music Group, a licensing division. So
Yeah.
I have a global sync team. We do a lot of licensing for TV, film, commercials, and ads. And
Okay.
then at the top of this year, I got heavily into Web3. I ended up winning a hackathon on a scholarship with Blue DAO. Blue DAO helps women and non-binary get into the tech space.
Yeah.
So I did very well at a hackathon with them in Amsterdam in April. And I've since joined as a co-lead. I'm going to be leading up the Blue Angels Network,
Ooh.
which is really exciting. I'm going to be in Bogota next month, co-leading one of the scholarships with the rest of Blue DAO. It's co-sponsored by Polygon, which is really exciting. And then in addition to that, I do a lot of social impact work, specifically with the creative community. I was on the board of Sona. We helped change copyright law in 2018 with the Music Modernization Act, and I've since launched the Web3 Music Rights Group. So we're
Well,
trying to do this
you,
within Web3 Music Rights.
you're in all fronts. Like this is not how you
Wow.
you introduced yourself when we were
When we
when
met.
yeah.
Well, so we met specifically, right? So so Salim and I met on so I have how do I describe it? So we're doing, education is really important for me in terms of like giving creators an opportunity to understand all of the new developments that are happening in tech, but also
Yeah.
just in general in entertainment. A lot of creators are just really focused on their own art, which they need to be, but there's a whole business side to it. So I met Salim, but we talked primarily about the three organizations that I was involved in. One is my company called Register One, and we're starting Register One Academy to educate creators, music creators into the space, into Web3 specifically. And then Blue DAO, we're doing the same for women. And then Entrepreneurs of Tomorrow, that was the third meeting that we had. That's another organization I'm on the board of. And they basically specialize in giving financial literacy education and entrepreneur training to at-promise youth. Black
Yeah.
and brown kids specifically. So we're kind of hitting all different ages. But yeah, so when Salim and I met, it was under the guise of the academy programs we're setting up.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a Swiss Army knife over there. Just kind of everything. Wow. I didn't know about all these. Lim, you brought some fire into the show. Oh
Oh
my
yeah.
gosh.
Oh yeah. 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 I bring
Good.
only the
I'm so
most
proud of you, man.
entertaining and most educated guests ever.
Amazing.
For sure. Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I'm
That's
a
pretty
bit
impressive.
speechless now. Let me just gather my thoughts
Ah.
for a bit. Like Channing, the floor is all yours, or Jess, the floor is all
Yeah,
yours.
sure. I mean, apparently you have done so many things in the past. And to the topic of the show today, what have brought you into the Web3 space? I mean, isn't Web2 space as good as before, or what's wrong with Web2?
Yeah, so I would say, Web 2 hasn't been great for musicians and creators. You have the rise of the middle class musician, you have the ability for you to upload content and for creators to get in touch with their fans directly, but it prioritized the tech over the creative, right?
Yeah.
Content and IP. So you have these billion-dollar industries that popped up where they are streaming music essentially for free, right? The rates have just kind of plummeted. And the prioritization of the tech delivery system over what the creatives have to offer hasn't really been a fair system. So I think as Web3 has been developing, for me what's been really exciting is that shift in not just the ethos but the technology.
Yeah.
Being able to have peer-to-peer transactions, being able to prioritize that creator economy in a different way, and not just using NFTs but also digital currencies. So for me, it's how do we take this new technology and craft a better ecosystem for creatives. So I've been really, a lot of my impetus for launching so many things so quickly is how do we get into this space before there's a reconsolidation with, a lot of the tech powers that took over in Web 2. and really consolidated the market in an unfair way for creators.
Yeah, that's not a small task.
Not
to
at all.
put it.
Not at all. So do you see Web3 as a future thing to all of these industries, or specifically to music and art industry?
I mean, I think, I can only really speak on, I think like creative IP, like, my basically, with regards to, TV, film, music, anything that's IP driven. I think for the creator economy, definitely, I think we're not going to be calling it Web3 in the next year or so. I think that's kind of a little bit looking under the hood. And, from what I've seen with all these chains cropping up, it's great to understand how the technology functions, but I think we're going to end up with a lot of hybrid solutions in terms of what works, for on-ramp and off-ramping for fiat, and just for certain things that need to have a contracting party with DAOs where it has to be a little more formal than how we all anticipated how DAO is running. So yeah, I think that this is going to be the wave of the future, but I think it's going to be more of a hybrid than, the champions. Like we all wanted to go full on Web3. And I think that we're going to end up with a hybrid model essentially. And no one's going to be calling it blockchain Web3. Like it's going to be back under the hood where people are just uploading, experiencing, their fans are going to get back to experiencing creative content and creators are going to get back to producing the creative content. And this will all be under the hood.
Yeah, it's something I've seen with other techs, for instance, like AI or even computers. Like if you think of it, at first it has big words, or marketing titles and stuff, and it becomes a buzzword in itself. And then slowly, as the technology matures, it just creeps in or is under the hood of other everyday devices and stuff like that. And you don't even realize that, for instance, like you're using AI or an ATM. Like an ATM, you don't think of an ATM as a computer, but in the end, it is.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And so I think blockchain is going.
I don't know how my car operates. Like
exactly.
Back in the day, you used to have to know when things would break down and fix it. But and you should know. But the basic knowledge, a little light goes on, and I'm like, I should put oil in it. But you don't really you take for granted all the technology that you use that you don't really have to know what's under the hood. So I think, for better or worse, people, especially the fact that, we are so interconnected with social media, like, I think that the terminology is championing the movement, but I think the technology behind it is sound. I just think we have to find a way to position it both, if you think of that, the percentage of people that are using Web3, it's an untapped market. Everybody's hearing buzzwords. And I think, or actually, I know this from the music industry, creatives don't really know the business side. They get into it because they love playing guitar or they want to create a film or they want to write a book, right?
Yeah.
And usually the first range of people that you come into contact with know that you're naive and they take advantage of you. And that's just, you would hope you'd find people that are trustworthy, but a lot of those people are working with people that are a little further along. So I feel like it's the same thing with Web3, like, which for me is why the education is so important. How do you give people the terminology in a way they understand so they know the right questions to ask?
Yeah.
So that when they're being approached by NFT platforms and they're a musician or they're an artist, they know to ask about the splits.
Yeah.
They know what rights they should be entitled to. They know to ask, like, is it really stored on a blockchain or is it a private server? Like, do I have access to secondary sales? And these are all things that sound complicated, but if we can find a way to make it simple, we really are going to give creators, I think, a leg up in this space.
Yeah, especially when
that's what we're doing, isn't it?
When you show them the alternative.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, why wouldn't you do it? But you have to understand it. And that's totally true.
Yeah.
Maybe talk.
That's a
go ahead.
Go on.
Go ahead.
I was saying that was a very nice example. Actually, we used it. Used the exact example a couple of weeks ago. We thought about. We made the example of internet and the cars as well. So such as internet, I think blockchain right now, as a lot of people are saying, is just like in the starting days of the internet. Like we all remember, like, I'm old enough to remember the dial-ups, with the dee, that kind of sound. And you have to cut off the telephone for a couple of hours in order to do something online, and the speed was so slow. And people were like, what are you going to use internet for? I mean, you have TV, you have the radio. Why do you need internet? And look at where we are now. And the thing about it is nobody knows what those symbols are, what those technologies are anymore. Like the 90% of the problems get solved by restarting your router, right? Your modem.
Yes.
And it's still, your problem still exists. Just restart your computer, and then that's it. That's the remaining part of the problems these days. And even my parents are using the online shopping every single day, and they don't even know what HTTPS means, what these, what all these things mean. So I think that's really is where the future is going for blockchain technology or Web3, as people are using it without even knowing it is the Web3. It is using blockchain technology, and people like me and Salim, and we really believe in blockchain is the next generation technology that is going to change a lot of things, not just NFTs or Bitcoin or price speculation. It is going to change our lives fundamentally. So we are on the same line in here, at least.
100%.
Jess, I wanted to ask you a question, maybe more specifically geared towards BlueDAO. Could you talk a little bit more about BlueDAO?
Yeah, absolutely. So BlueDAO is incredible. I mean, I'm biased, but the mission of BlueDAO is to educate women and non-binary into this space, into Web3 and technology specifically. The three tenets are learn, earn, and play. So, there's definitely an element of the culture of this where it has to be fun, right?
Yeah.
We have these like hacker houses that have cropped up. We've done, we used to call them scholarship programs. Now we're calling them hacker programs all over the world. We've done ETH Amsterdam, Denver, Rio. We're doing ETH Bogota. So we have a lot of programming that's coming up, and we've started to crop up like different chapters regionally. So the idea is to basically create community for women. So women represent around 1% of tech. And this is a cause that's really important to me because in music, it's the same thing. If you look at the people that are earning the most in music or the executives, it's not women. So being able to break that glass ceiling has been really, really important to me.
You said the word. Perfect. You said the word. Please,
it's really important to me.
Maybe for those that don't know, what is the glass ceiling?
Yeah, so I mean, a glass ceiling is just, it's essentially when you look at who's running a lot of the major corporations and networks, are you represented in it, right? And specifically, it doesn't just have to be women. Like we can talk about LGBTQ, we can talk about BIPOC, but historically there is a certain demographic, white men that specifically at certain levels pull a lot of the strings, right? And as long as that's the case, it doesn't reverberate down, right? And as far as rising the ranks, I think that there's this misperception that, there's only enough room for maybe one or two, right? So I'm going to be the token woman. I'm going to be the token person of color. I'm going to be the token LGBTQ representative. And it really isn't the case, right? I think especially more like ever since there was a shift towards the gig economy and smaller businesses and entrepreneurship focused as opposed to just being, accepting the structure as it is and becoming an employee and just kind of having to fight your way up. If we can craft the way these organizations look, we have to give people the opportunity to see themselves in those spaces. If you don't see another woman leader, you don't know you can be a leader. If you don't see a person of color running a company. So I think, I know that representation in these spaces is a huge part of it, but also education, right? Like giving someone a leg up. And we hear it all the time. Like, we talked about this, like even with like say TechTree, for example, like where are your upper echelon of women, right? And it is hard to find women developers. I run through the same problem with my business. How do I find women producers at a certain level? And it's a catch-22 because if women aren't given those opportunities,
exactly,
it's not as easy to
because
find
they make like half. You make half of our species, so it shouldn't be that hard,
It shouldn't be that hard. And a lot of it is perception. And some of it is also just giving that, like making sure you look around the room. And we actually, it's interesting. So I just got inducted to the Recording Academy as a voting Grammy member. And I got appointed to the producer and engineers wing. And there's this thing called Women in the Mix. And we had a really interesting meeting this past week where they were talking about how do we solve this gap, and we're doing this project called Women in the Mix. So it's a visibility of women producers and engineers, right? But there was a few men that like raised their hands in this meeting and they were great. And they're like, how do I support this? Like, can I be on panels? How do I support this cause? And we all kind of looked around and said, you support this cause by looking around. And if your entire project is all men, you're doing something wrong. Like, look around and work a little harder to find a woman engineer or a woman producer or a woman lawyer. Like, it really, it's that simple. Like, it starts on that level where you look around, and if everyone looks like you, and even for me, if I look around and it's all women, I'm doing the opposite thing, right? So like, how do I look around and see, like, have I started to gravitate towards just wanting people like me because they look like me to be part of this space?
Yeah.
And it's not even a charity thing. It's, you get better ideas when you have multiple perspectives.
Yeah, it's exactly
right?
that. Like, you have to have that 360 scope. Otherwise, like, this is how you can get the better of your project, of your institution, or anything. Just because, well, we are all humans and we're all fallible. Fallible, yeah. By having different point of view confront, also, this is something that is a bit harder to do, like confronting, your point of view and like getting out of your zone of comfort when it regards to idea. But it's something that in the end, like, if you're making a product, if you're creating an institution, it'll be way, way better.
Well, yeah, and also, like, how do we normalize it, right? So, like, one of the things I love about Blue DAO is, like, when we go to these parties and events, all of a sudden you're seeing, like, all of these people crop up and say, like, wow, like, can we hang with you? Like, other women will find us and go, wow, there's a whole group of women that just walked into this party or this event or this space, which is really powerful. But I would love to get to a position where it isn't the case. And I love that, like, Celine, you mentioned, like, you want to champion women, and we need more men and to think about that, right? And so, like, look around and say, like, how do we pull you into this room? And I always think about that with, like, the LGBTQ community or BIPOC. I look around and I'm like, am I sitting in a room full of white people? Like, like, I think that at any level, like, we can all, even if we're an underserved population as a woman, right, or an LGBTQ, I can still look around and say, like, where's my privilege, potentially barring other people? Like, how do I use my privilege to pull in people into the situation? So, I would love to get to a point where we've normalized this, right? So one of the things we're doing down in Bogota, if you guys are going to be at DevCon and Bogota, is we have a hacker house that's co-sponsored by Polygon, and we're going to be doing Blue Day. So it's a full day, it's free.
Blue Day, okay.
Yep, and it's a full day of workshops, boot camps. We have a whole dev team, hacker developer team that goes through and does the tech side. Then we're going to be doing panels on career stuff. And then also, I want a hackathon, and now what? What does that look like? How do I turn this into a company? We also ended up getting the ETH Hubs stage. So we're going to have a hub stage officially with regards to the conferences. So if you're going to the conference, come by. We're going to be doing a lot of programming with women in tech speakers specifically, and we've partnered with HerDAO, with Blue DAO Latam, HerDAO Latam, and there's about 3 or 4 other women organizations. So it's been really cool. We're doing this DAO alliance across other women groups globally, and we're all going to be together putting the speakers on stage. So if you're going to be at those conferences, come by. We have a stage where you're going to see, women speaking on tech.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to follow up, Channing, or should I?
Yeah, you go ahead. I'm still trying to, there's a lot of information to digest, and it's really amazing. It's I was thinking about when you just comment on where we need different aspects in their lives to talk to us, and that's reminded me one of my favorite book by Ray Dalio, by surround yourself with different opinions, and that's the only one. That's the only way to get superior, like gets better, because only the different opinions that's going to change our perspectives, not the ones who agree with us all the time. So, absolutely. And right now, what we have in this world, especially in the crypto world, we don't see a lot of. I mean, we are probably the Asians, the white people. They are the main people, like guys, especially like the main people in the crypto space. But in terms of women or other races in this world, is we need more people in this space to show a good whole world to everyone.
Yeah, it's not representative otherwise.
Right,
exactly.
Right. That's exactly it too. Is you look at the demographic of the human population is made up of, and then you look at who's who's controlling the narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think there's or I know that there's a lot of inequity because of who's controlling the narrative. And you know, it's not for lack of intelligence or aptitude or vision. You know, it's really just creating that space, right? And continuing to create and hold that space. And not, you know, and again, competition is healthy, right? Like we're all like, you know, I was up, you know, we all wake up early and we hustle, and like, especially in this space, like you have to be enough of a visionary to see where it's going and then put the teams together and just like, you know, put in that hard work, have that faith, but put in that hard work. And it is competitive, but there is enough space for everybody if you really understand that and believe, which I do, that everybody has something unique about them, right? So if you can find out what their aptitude and their passion is and put them in the right direction and motivate them in that right direction, you're not really competing for space. Like kind of what you said, you know, about like, you know, like Salim with you and Channing, like, you know, Channing, like you specializing on the NFT side and kind of in the DeFi, digging in on that, and Salim with the code. Like, you know, we all have a thing that we gravitate towards that's our ace, right? And I talk about this all the time when I'm, you know, coaching people into getting into like sync licensing or something like that. I have a lot of people that'll say, I'm good at all of these genres. And I'm like, that's great, but what's your ace? Can you dial in what your ace is? Because we're all marginally great at something and we can continue to learn and we can, you know, work out that aptitude. But, you know, there's certain things that we're just really, really great at. And if we can start to understand what that is, that's when you put together incredible teams of people. Right? Like I don't wake up in the morning and start my day probably the way that you guys do. And I don't get as energized by the things that you do that maybe I do. And that's where if everyone can be passionate about that thing, and then you put together a powerhouse team. And that's where I think a lot of this gets lost when we don't create room for diversity. You know, because we're not really looking at the resources that we have, at the vast experience, at the passion. Like that's, you know, that's such a powerful tool if we can harness it.
No, definitely. And
love it.
Maybe something also I really liked about the DAO, and probably afterwards we'll come back to music because music is also like super fascinating for me. But what I really liked about your DAO is like you're on the same kind of mission as we are, where we are like, yeah, you could do crypto and you can find a job in crypto, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a dev job or a trading job, because that's what most people think, you know, when they think crypto. Either dev because it's IT stuff, computer, and so, oh, I have to learn to code, or it's finance, so it's charts, so I have to trade, you know. And so, how do you approach this, or how do you show that there's other things, you know, there's plenty of fishes in the sea? In a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been really good at Blue DAO with like, you know, we focus very heavily on devs because women devs are really underrepresented, right? And I think project managers, business, like, you know, arguably
we're getting there, on this area we're getting there.
We're getting there, correct? But like the dev side is still like, you know, something that, you know, we really make sure we put a lot of effort into women that want to get into this space, right? But, you know, I think, you know, what we're noticing that we're starting to shift our program into with Blue, and, you know, we're actually, aside from the educational platform that we're building, you know, we also have an incubator, and I'm going to be heading up the Blue Angels network, and that's going to be angel investors kind of coming in at different levels, right? And this is that part, right, where what I've noticed with these hackathons is we've been really good at putting together like one person that's not a dev, that's maybe a product or project manager. You know, me being part of this, I'm an entrepreneur. So I started my own business. I've launched other business. I launched a grant fund during the pandemic. I've helped restructure a bunch of organizations. It's a different skill set to think as an entrepreneur. And, you know, and that's a little bit different, or a lot different than career tracking, right? So we've been doing really well with these camps and with the instruction on career mapping, and saying like, how do you know how to approach these other companies and get involved? And if that's where you want to fit in, that's fantastic. If you're winning these hackathons, that's a different skill set, right? You're either going to take that technology and sell it into something, or maybe you want to launch a company. So that's some of the programming that we're starting to develop a little bit more. We're going to actually have a new panel we're adding down in Bogota that's like, I want a hackathon, now what? That I'm going to be co-leading, because that is a question that I'm seeing crop up a lot, you know, with these teams that are winning. And, you know, I'll get calls and they'll say, hey, what do we do now? Like, if you have 5 people, we're going to continue, but how do we structure it? You know, and it's a combination of understanding what we just talked about. How do we put a team together? You know, and how do we value the different things that if we're going to create a company, you're going to create that team in a really strong way. But also often overlooked is how do we have difficult conversations and how do we communicate, right? And I know this from, again, devs aren't different from musicians, right? So a lot of developers are great at what they do because they sit there for hours alone in a computer, with a computer. I played guitar for God knows how many years in my room before I started touring, before I started recording. That's an inordinate amount of time not developing social skills, not having difficult conversations with people, not navigating a different world. So, I think that part of the education is also knowing how to have these conversations to team build, right? Because the thing that got you good at your craft is your island. But as long as you're on an island, you're not going to be able to build something together, right? You can pop into someone else's
and
structure, which is
it's the same when we were saying we have to seek out different opinions.
Yeah.
But it's not because we have to seek out different opinions that it's going to be an easy task. And because like when you analyze or when you go down to like the core root of what is forming your opinion, it's the same as like a 5-year-old kid saying why and why and why again. At some point, it gets to that arbitrary level where like, I don't know, I just like it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where discussions become heated because like, well, you like it this way, I like it the other way. How can we find common ground or a middle ground, or maybe this time we have it your way and next time we'll have it my way. But this is like a hard part of a conversation. This is not the easy part,
Yeah, and there's a lot of genius, right, in lanes, and I think that's the other part too. Is like, you can be a genius in your lane and know tech very well and know this very well and be very pragmatic. I think a great evolution of spirit to reach those higher levels is to take a moment, and if you're feeling triggered, take a step back and say, all right, hold on a minute. I don't agree with this, but if I suspend disbelief for a moment, if I just try that head on, like. I might not agree with everything, but am I going to learn something? And, I think that's, if you have certainty, you can't create something new.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people really hang their hat on certainty, and that's fine. And this is why it goes back to like when I say like know what your ace is, right? There's nothing wrong. I did a leadership conference in Israel about a month ago. They took all these LGBTQ leaders. It was the Schuster Foundation. It was an amazing program, and there were 30 LGBTQ leaders between Mexico and the U.S. And we went all over Israel and Palestine, and we met with a lot of thought leaders in this space, right? And there was one section where they were doing some leadership training, and I found it really interesting because, I know that it's great to encourage people to want to be a leader, but some people aren't leaders. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that there's this pressure to say you all can be a leader, right? And I think that it's the wrong way to approach it because, some people might not want to be a leader. Like there are certain areas in my life where I show up on a soccer team and I want there to be a captain, and I want to show up and I play center mid. I want to pop I don't want to lead the team. I don't have that vision to lead that team. Whereas like in other areas of my life, I'm putting teams together and I lead. So I think like knowing your ace, that's the other part. Super important is knowing your ace. And if you feel like you want to develop and grow into a space, like Channing, you mentioned Ray Dalio. I love Ray Dalio. I have a couple of those books. Huge Tony Robbins fan. Anytime they overlap on anything, I'm 100% in it. I love the idea that you can have a vision, but you also then have to decide if you want to put the work towards it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that like that idea of leadership and of understanding like where you fit in on a team is really important because that like, and again, this gets a little more spiritual, but it comes down to like, do you feel fulfilled? And are you happy with where you are, right? So I think in this space, I love that with Blue, we're doing career tracking, we're doing entrepreneurial training. I love what you guys are doing with Tech Tree. I'm really excited to offer some of the step ups, like with our Register One Academy, where like maybe we're focused on music and Web3, but then we can pop into some of your content and say
that is the perfect
you want to deep dive? Yeah, but it's saying like, how do we deep dive, right? Like, how do we share the knowledge that we have? And I think it is like allowing everyone to have their own journey and not telling them where they're going, where they have to end up, right? Where they think they should end up.
Definitely. Channing, questions before we switch to music?
Amazing. That's amazing. I didn't realize that we're going to have such a deep conversation regarding the DAOs, regarding the Web3, rather than just music, because I thought we're just going to talk about music.
Yeah, so I introduced you like, she works in the music industry and she does stuff in crypto. So it's the bridge between the two.
Yes, of course.
That's really amazing. And one thing that I think there's a difference between Slim's and Jess, your opinion is Slim was like, how do we find all these people people supposed to be knowing how do I put it in words? Web3 is not only about NFTs or crypto or coding, but where I think I kind of agree, lean towards to Jess' position here, because she's saying like, if you want something, because especially when you said Ray Dalio and Tony Robbins, and which is, I have a couple of books just on my bookshelf, just here. I'll grab later on. But the common things about them too is like, you have to know where your aids are, or where you have to know where you can contribute to this mini society or bigger society or your family. You have to know where you are good at. Therefore, you can find where you can maximize those things. And I think that's a very good thing about crypto, whereas everybody can jump in and do their own things. And but on how can they find their purpose is their problem. Like, they have to get up and start running and to find their own purpose of the life. And that's, we need to inspire them, but it's up to them how to find their really passion into this thing. And that's why our job is to tell people how Web3 is promising, and how NFT and the cryptocurrency, or the blockchain rather than cryptocurrency, is going to change a lot of things in the world. And I think that's perfectly into music. What do you think music in blockchain is going to be different than the Web2 world, or the CDs or the DVDs? What is the main difference, or Spotify as a streaming service?
Yeah, so I don't think it will be different unless enough good actors get into the space and create things with integrity. And I don't mean to sound so defeatist, but they're
so big labels will still rule the music industry even if it shifts fully into crypto?
It's not, labels aren't necessarily ruling the industry as much anymore as tech giants, right?
Okay, yeah.
And a lot of the labels are actually owned by major publicly traded investment companies.
Okay.
So I think that the issue is like, how do you follow the thread, right? So there's a romanticization. We romanticize the record label. It's like the white horse, right?
Yeah.
If I play guitar, if I show up, labels are going to show up. I'm going to sign that deal, and I'm going to be taken care of, and everything's going to be fine. And that was a great. It wasn't a myth like 15, 20 years ago. And Channing mentioned like startup, like dial-up modems, right? Like, when you didn't have access to home, like to laptops and computers, you really were at the mercy of these major recording studios, right? You had to figure out how to go in to record a song. So no one's talking about this evolution of technology that really has given the power back to the creators, right? So there is still this myth of, if I sign this record deal, I'm going to be fine. But like, I can tell you, living in Los Angeles, most of these records are made in film production studios. We have massive studios sitting empty. We have lockouts from a major label right now that's sitting empty because the producers have their studios in their houses, and it's more comfortable for the artist to go in there. And it's great to have a giant space, but why would you want to pay back your label in advance at a couple of $1,000 a day rate when maybe you don't need it? Maybe you go in one day and you track live drums in there, or an orchestra. But so I think, I know that Web3 can change this ecosystem. Can we get people in there like me, like, people that I'm putting together around Register One, like the Music Rights Web3, can we educate them into this space? And then can we move into this area with enough integrity? And, I think it's hard. Like, how do we change nature, right? Like, if you see, this is like an age-old thing that goes back. I don't know if you guys have seen the Elvis film, but it's the Baz Luhrmann Elvis film is like the best thing to watch if you want to see how the music industry works, because you see this guy who took advantage of Elvis, who was the manager, who used to be, he used to find carnival talent. And that's like, it's never this whole idea of business people taking advantage of creatives, it doesn't go away. It's been around since the moment that a business person saw someone making someone laugh in a crowd and said, I'm going to put, and there is at best an amazing symbiotic relationship, because you need the business side for a creative. But it's just rife with this propensity to not do it with integrity. So what I'm excited about in Web3 is, and again, this goes back to like what we talked about with diversity, right? Where it's not just a bleeding heart thing saying this is the way the world should be, right?
Yeah.
It's what is the value proposition, right? And I'll say that there's a value proposition to fans and artists to make a system that works without having all these layers that we have traditionally in music. So it's not even saying we have to be fair because we should be fair. It's saying, well, why do we have record labels and distributors? And why do we have all these layers where a fan spends the same amount of money, but like 15 different people take money out of the pot and then it goes back to the artist? We can use distributed ledger technology to make that more efficient, right? We can create an ecosystem with currency, with social currency for artists, where the fans directly participate in the ecosystem that they're already supporting. So how do we create that with integrity? And and that's something I haven't figured out yet. Like I do know that I want to
have all the answers. Really?
No. No, I know. I wish I did. I mean, I do want. I know that I want to be more vocal in a consistent way. We're going to start doing this with the Web3 Music Rights Group, where we review some of these platforms and we give the pros and the cons. And maybe we're able to hold accountable and say, look, yes, could you do this and take advantage of artists? Absolutely. And there are a bunch of bad actors that are cropping up that are making a ton of money because they're trying to get users. VCs see that they're getting users, and it's the same crappy system. I had someone ask me like last month, they were like, we're creating the newest, a new Spotify, like, and they showed me the deck, and I'm like, first of all, no one wants a new Spotify. Spotify has made an entire business around not paying artists or creatives. We just had a massive win where now 15% of revenue goes back to artists, which is great because before 15% of revenue, but let's do the math here, right? So right now before this it's based off of just streaming, right? So they were giving a 0.00001, some ridiculous amount back to the creatives, right? So here you are, you've cropped up an entire platform around selling music. Imagine you had a store and you're like, I'm going to sell headphones, but I'm not going to pay you for them. I'm going to give you now a 15% royalty profit share. Okay, but you create that, you make the headphones, you manufacture them, you put them in my store, and for the privilege of doing all of that with all that exposure, I'm going to give you 15% of my profits. What other industry does that? And everyone's celebrating, and I understand that we have to have incremental victories. But what if we had, like, I know with Register One, we're doing the opposite. We want to create a free system where people can look up all of the discrepancies from the ground up. But we want to, if we do a 5% admin, we're going to have the first system where that goes into a DAO treasury. And now you participate in your own collection process. Like that's the way it can be, I think in this space. So do I think it's going to be better for creatives? I think it can be. I think that we need to have more people that are committed to, the same thing with the diversity, like think a little more, right? Like work a little harder to put together a profitable system, that doesn't do it at the expense of other people.
Yeah. And
that is amazing.
I have a question. Do you have drawbacks or fear from the artists? Because I believe like you're not only talking to like institution or entities, you're also talking with like individuals and artists. Are they like fully jumping like, where do I sign? Or are they more like, are you sure this is a good thing? Like I'd rather have my crappy deal on Spotify because it's established or whatever,
Yeah, I mean, I think that the temperature right now seems to be that people are really excited about this NFT thing, right? Okay. And and that's as deep as it's gotten. Is like I can have my NFT and Lao and all these. They're looking at a few, like it's like the top 1%. It's the myth of 1%, right? We look at this all the time and we're like, oh my God, they made millions and millions. If I have an NFT as well, I'm going to make millions and millions. So I'm not seeing hesitancy moving into the space because it's being marketed as like this holy grail of what's going to happen. So
how to get rich quick.
Yeah, how to get rich quick. So, and then what happens? Who's the first brain of people? Like we had this with my music group where we had a lot of people come after us for some of our major artists that were touting their NFT release strategies and their platforms, and a lot of them were pump and dumps. They were like, cool, we're going to do a market spend of 100,000, 200,000, and we're going to sell this whole thing. And then the deeper that I got into it, we pulled out of pretty much all those deals because we're like, well, then you're leaving us with something that's worth nothing. And then we have to contend with fans that are pissed that they bought these NFTs or a currency that's not worth anything. And now you as a marketing company got in and out, right? You pumped and dumped, you got your stuff, you made it. And now we're left dealing with a community that trusted us.
Yeah.
So I have to say, I don't think there's a lot of fear because everyone's just seeing the shiny object. They're seeing the new tech, they're seeing the money fly around, and they're really excited about what that looks like. I think also, like, you have to remember, it's like when we talked about, if you don't see yourself in a space that you don't know that you could be there, right? I think that there's so many people that have grown up in the digital era that they don't remember how much CDs cost. They don't remember how much more money you'd make when you were able to just download a song as opposed to stream it. So there's, I don't think that they're seeing those possibilities. So I don't see fear. I just see, I don't think they see the possibilities, and where they see the possibilities is a little bit problematic because, it's a different strategy. You guys know this with NFTs. It's about community building. Fandom is always going to be about community building. No matter what new technology crops up, if the entire solar flare and if all technology goes away, it's always going to be about community building with fandom. It's going to be about gathering a crowd. It's no different in the NFT space.
Yeah, this is actually the when I used to follow like a 3D artist, and he was fiercely opposed to NFTs and crypto because for him, total scam basically, or like total hype. But you forget, you quickly forget the environmental concerns and all of that. But then he kind of changed his mind because he was saying NFTs is here to stay amidst all the pump and dumps, all the hype, because it's a new way for the diehard fans to engage with their artist or music or whatever art. And so I found it interesting because, it's the same as the concert ticket, basically. Issue a concert ticket with an NFT, then maybe you get, a special single that is only available, on the NFT itself. And so that might be a new ways to make maybe fans more engaged. I don't know. Have you seen some changes or some stuff there?
So I think that it's like decoupling the buzzword, right?
Yeah.
So if NFTs are collectibles, right? So fandom and purchasing things, it gets you into a collectibles kind of market, right? And I grew up working in comic stores when I was a kid, so like front row seat to like just the craze of the collectible market.
Yeah.
So I think when we're thinking of NFTs as collectibles, it's problematic, right? Because it is a bit of a buzz thing. NFTs, for me, what excites me about NFTs is the utility for access, right?
Yeah.
So if we're using these things to access communities, if we're using them as passes, like I love what Gary Vee did with VeeFriends. I did a bunch of case studies at the top of the year for different types of, projects. And for me, like looking at like a multi-tiered membership level, even though the art wasn't paramount with, if you look up VeeFriends, really what it is access to his, and he does it like Gary Kahn, but you know what I mean? It's like he doodled on a napkin and like it has different levels, but what's cool to me about an NFT is the utility attached to it. So, if people aren't that techie who are listening to this, what that means is that it's essentially a pass, right? And it's something that comes along with that pass. So for me, decoupling NFTs from that rave collectible thing and really drilling in and kind of, I think that's the sleeper value, right? Is actually this concept of utility, because you can gate communities, right? You can say if you have different levels of this NFT, you have access to, Discord, or you have access to concerts, you have access to content. And it's kind of taking the fan club model and it's automating it and it's putting it on steroids. It's gamifying it, right? And it's also presenting a value that continues on, because if you have access with these NFTs, then there's that value that you can continue to resell, right? And re-engage with your community. So I think, for me, it is that decoupling of NFTs from that perception of collectible and kind of providing a value and using it more, thinking it more as like a concert pass or an all access badge. Like that to me is the value of this NFT concept.
That's very spot on, actually. Very spot on. As you just mentioned in the beginning of the talk of the music, and you said it is probably going to be better if we are, we have more good players rather than bad players into the space, because that's what we have seen for the NFT space for the last 12 to 30 months. NFT was the was the word of the year of Collins Dictionary of 2021. It is literally
Wow.
the word of the this dictionary, right? It's NFTs, and the second word was metaverse. So
Cool.
everybody knows about, at least heard about NFT these days, but
Yeah.
everybody is treating it as a pump and dump. At least we see it now. We didn't see it 6 to 7 months ago. We didn't see it with, when we were analyzing NFT, a lot of people were like, you know what, I like the art of it. I think the art is pretty good. I mean, who knows about what art is? I mean, we were looking at, a picture of monkey, a picture of whatever, a stick figure, and we're thinking, okay, the art is pretty clean, pretty neat. I mean, you don't even know what art is, right? And then people are treating all these JPEGs and then flipping them, making good money out of it. And there are a lot of big money playing the pump and dump scheme as well. So we really are not lack of these bad players in the NFT. Therefore, I think that's what Salim was mentioning. His friend was like, seeing all this happening with NFTs, making them entering the artist entering the space feel like they're trying to catch on the what is it called, the hatch wagon, what is
The bandwagon, jump on
the
the
bandwagon. Yeah, they're catching on the bandwagon now, therefore making them look bad rather than just making a lot of money. So that's, I think, what their concerns are these days. But to have a comparison, what do you think, because you are in the music industry, I'm not, Salim is not, definitely not, but what is the pay rate right now if someone posts a music on the Spotify to stream it, and then how does that compare to Web3? Because you just mentioned 15%, and what is the real rate for normal music?
So the new thing, I mean, there really isn't a normal rate. So basically how these streaming platforms have collectively bargained essentially is that there's certain, without getting too much in the weeds, there's certain elements of copyrights that are federally protected. And there's certain statutory rates where you're entitled to like a royalty stream, right? Based on what you own. If you own like the sound recording master, if you own the publishing. So there are certain things that had historically been protected, but why this happened the way it did is because these tech providers said, well, this isn't broadcast, this is new media, right? So we don't have to pay those protected rates because this is streaming, it's new media. So, every time, that's exactly what happened. Correct. So, and RateCourt has been backed up 5 years plus. So part of what we did with SONA and a few of the other organizations with the Music Modernization Act, which is laudable, in 2018, we passed the Music Modernization Act to dictate some terms for streaming, right? Now, streaming has been allowed for 10 years. It took that long. And that's what I mean when I say bad actors, because it's an industry where, and I mean, this is a Richard Branson quote, but it's better to ask, forgiveness than permission, right? So by the time these lawsuits cash up, a lot of times there's enough market share that they're willing to just gamble and roll the dice and say, okay, slap me on the wrist. I'll pay 50 million. My company's worth $500,000. Or sorry, I'll pay 50 million. My company's worth $500 million, right? So as far as these pay rates go, the streaming rates, I mean, it's something like, it depends on what rights that you hold. So it's different. So what ended up happening was these tech companies fragmented the record labels and the publishers, and they offered a better deal to the record labels. Record labels weren't participating in revenue and broadcast. So they said, new income stream for you. So we lost that collective bargaining power. If we just stuck together, we would have gotten what we were entitled to, ideally. But the record label got greedy and said, cool, we'll take this rate. It's new income stream for us. Publishers made less. So, the streaming rates are like, it's something like 0.000001. It's something ridiculous. The amount of spins and plays you have to get before you see any money is ridiculous. And then with this new 15%, the cool part is the rate is based off of the profit of Spotify. Now that's better or worse, right? Because Spotify has managed to spend itself into oblivion, right? And they've done that with the medium executive salary of over 6 figures. So they look and go, oh, we don't have a profit. Look at this. We're actually in the red. But then you look at what they're spending. Well, yeah, we're a charity, but we're paying our executives millions of dollars. We're paying most of our employees in the 6 figures. So where's that money coming from? The money's coming in. It's just that corporate game of spending yourself into oblivion. So, I think, do I see more opportunities for profits in Web3? It depends, right? So, and this is, I don't know how nerdy to get, but like, what's been fascinating for me to learn about Web3, I've had a lot of meetings with chains about ROIs for some of our projects, right? So we're looking for grants. And so I'm putting together these traditional plans saying like, here's the revenue model. And actually flat out had one chain tell me, we don't really care about the revenue model because we are more concerned that you're building a sustainable project with high transactions because the chain makes money, right? With the exchange of the currency and the transactions, right? It makes money. I mean, but essentially, if they're looking for the livelihood of that blockchain, it's a different way of thinking, right? It's not about how much revenue a project makes. It's about those transactions that continue to give money to validators, right? Or to stakers, however, proof of work, proof of stake. But so it's a different way of conceiving of a profit margin. So do I think that you can make more money? Absolutely. But I think that it's going to be when creators stop looking at platforms, right? Like how do we break them from the last 15 years of them going, I'm going to upload to Spotify? And how do we create systems where we say, no, you are the system, right? We can find something that's maybe a free streaming service that we create. I know we're going to hack on this problem down in Colombia with Gallery DAO. So hopefully we'll have an answer for you on the not Spotify model, right? Where we shift that percentage. But I think the real profit is going to be getting creator teams, taking out the label and the publisher model and getting creator teams and fans, right? Maybe creator DAOs to realize that if you create a currency, this new system will profit, like how do they think about the economics? How do we create a new ecosystem around an artist and their fans? And that profit margin would be higher. And I know, Chang, that's not necessarily like a concrete answer. But in music, we're dealing with pennies, nickels, dimes, right? Like we're dealing with like residuals and royalties in addition to like maybe straightforward merch or ticket sales, right? So, and that's where distributed ledger technology is great, right? Yeah. How do we track data? How do we make data streams transparent? How do we see where the money is? And these are inefficiencies in the current system. So, I know that worldwide, the entertainment industry is like, it's in the billions and billions, right? So if we can find a way to not just harness this for musicians, but any creative IP holder, right? If you're entitled to royalties as a writer. That was
exactly going to be my next question.
So that revenue doesn't go away. That revenue is fan generated. Okay. So if we can use new technology and we can onboard fans into this new system, and cut out layers of inefficiency, who gets that profit? That profit goes to the creators. But with this new system, with buying in digital currency, it's a share, right? So imagine being a fan and having stake in the artist that you already have been investing your time, your attention, and your money into. So, that to me is a better value proposition.
Yeah. And since you're in LA and in the entertainment industry, LA is also famous for another entertainment industry, which is the music and movie industry. Do you dabble or do you do stuff with, or are you kind of related to the movie industry? Because I was wondering if you had an idea of if there is a merge or if there is a connection that can be made to the movie industry. For instance, will crypto change the movie industry as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fandom. It's the same, right? So and I specialize in specifically music for TV, film, commercials, visual media. So that's been my career for the last couple of decades. So all I do all day long is like do deals between like now recently more metaverses for licensing music, but also interactive exhibits, mobile games. So like films, like, so very like linked to licensing deals for music in these spaces. Because it's all content, right? It's all content, it's all IP. And, again, there's a lack of transparency with these privatized systems, and all of these studios have what we call IP, whether it doesn't matter whether it's a song or it's a movie or it's a book, right? If there's creative content, everybody, how do people track? They track with their own systems, their own ledgers. So like, do I see this revolutionizing the system? Of course. And I see a lot of, I see a lot of like inefficiencies being caught. Like if our Register One project does really well, we do want to open source it, and we do want to invite in other IP holders. We're going to start with music because that's what I know best. Music and visual media. But
this is your
theoretically take any copyright holder and say, hey, wouldn't you like there to be a transparent system as to who owns what rights when and who's using it worldwide? And what kind of technology can we use to enforce and protect your copyrights, but also just in a very clear way, have your money grabbed, and it doesn't need to be someone in a back office right now calling around, hearing that your song just aired in, a third world country and then arguing to get it paid. Now, we can't get around those systems, right? There's going to have to always be a link between, some sort of collection outside of the digital world, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, the movie industry, any type of user generated content, I think this is the new thing. This is the new collective bargain, right? That includes visual artists, 3D modelers, developers, ideally, right? Like, how do we have user generated content be protected in this space? Because now we can quantify it, and we can automate, right? How we quantify it. And if we can quantify it, then it shouldn't be hard to pay people fairly for what they're doing, right? It's the privatization of these systems is really what's kept a lot of people in power, and what's really kept this inequitable balance between where the money is flowing.
Yeah.
So again, bad actors can change that, but how do we have this window of time where we can create maybe a more efficient and a better system that's fair?
Yeah, I never thought to apply it to the whole user-generated economy, but yeah, in the end, it makes sense, and it's also like what it links or it connects with like the NFT gaming phase, because they in the when games that ran ish on blockchain, they were like, yeah, but we are changing the world, because if you play a video game nowadays, well, you put so much money into you put so much money, for instance, into new skins and stuff like that, but you don't own it, whereas you kind of bought it. But no, the IP is the property of like Epic Games or whatever. And so they were like, yeah, so now we make your skins like an NFT, so you are the rightful owner of it, and so you can do well, it's yours, do whatever you want with it. And so yeah, it's
yeah, I mean, I personally would love to see a shift. Like, how many subscriptions do you guys have, if you think about it, right? Like, remember, like Channing, you and I are older, clearly, because we remember dial up. But do you remember you'd buy software and you'd have it? And now over the last 10 years, now I'm paying how many thousands and thousands of dollars over years?
We've shifted to a subscription economy. That's definitely sure.
And that's with streaming services. So you don't buy a record, you stream it. And if that platform goes away, you don't have it. So that is the shift, right? Is the ownership. That is like, if there's no other takeaway other than this new technology, it is the idea that you can read, write, and own, right? You can create, you can consume, but you can also, again, have ownership in it. And that's what's been taken away in Web2, ownership. It's been consolidated. It's been taken somewhere else, right? So you don't really own anything. You don't even own your own pictures that you upload into Instagram. Like, you don't own anything. You're just giving it away. So and Web3, how do we get back to that concept of ownership and tracking? And that is a lot more equitable. You should be rewarded for your stories, and your art and your creativity and your intelligence and your attention that you give to your craft. So again, we can do that in Web3, a lot better. Which again, bad actors are going to want to figure out how that doesn't happen. So how do we get that word out, and how do we continue to tout companies that have that integrity, with that value proposition? Like, you should own, or not should, I hate the word should, you can own.
And if it's yours, like, maybe you do the philanthropic gesture, of giving it away for free, for instance. Why not? But the choice should be yours. Yeah.
Agreed.
So we're nearing the end. Channing, maybe a question, otherwise I have one.
I didn't realize that there is 1 hour already.
It flies so fast.
I actually have a lot of questions, but let me think about one of the, I think one of the things I want to touch base on is, during the last NFT phase, NFT craze, as everybody was trading NFTs for the last 6 months, 12 to 6 months. And I think we were only trading, most of them are JPEGs, because they are so easy to create. I mean, these people can only, they drop 10 pictures and then they can have thousands, 10K collection, just randomized by the computer. Whereas music is a different thing. It takes time to actually do all these music, and each music is on their own. You can't just create 10 songs and then, shuffle them and then make them 10,000 songs. It doesn't happen that way. Therefore, we didn't have all these music NFT to be trading, or gaming NFT to be trading for the last 6 months. Therefore, I think when the music NFT, there would be a new wave of music NFTs coming out because last 6 months people were trying to get music NFTs into the space. I think when they come, I think that would be a shift of minds. People thinking about trading things rather than, especially that heat has coming down a lot now. People would think, okay, music NFTs are actually value in these NFTs. There are things I'm actually supporting these creator. We are actually getting the utility out of NFTs. We're actually getting into the fandom. We're actually talking to the creators, all these kind of things. All the good things will come to the space, hopefully, with the good actors later on. But I do worry about, because you mentioned the IP thing, and that's something that's probably much more of a generic topic. Whereas because it's open source, and you just talk about we try to eliminate all these platforms because we are our own platforms, we are our own creators, we are our own systems. Therefore, if you create some songs and I really like it, because it's open source, I can copy and paste it and issue my own NFT using the same thing, same sound. And then because there's no platform regulating it, there's no way to track them.
So I think this is the thing. This is why you haven't seen a lot of music NFTs is you can't because, and this is actually with NFTs as well. Visual NFTs, there's fine print as to what you have, and these are called commercial or personal use rights. So even though, yes, people can, like spiral up a ton, if you read the commercial rights, a lot of the NFT projects don't give them to you. So there'll be fine print that say, yes, you own it, trade it, do this, but you can't make a TV show out of it because you don't own the commercial rights to the art, right? And so like, could you duplicate and send stuff? Sure, but we're getting back into the level of Napster and Kazaa where people were getting fined for pirating music. What makes it more complicated and why we don't see music NFTs are because it's not like delivering a visual image is a lot easier than a music audio file, right? Because if you're streaming it, that's one set of rights, right? If you're downloading it, do you get the download? There's different rates that are federally protected for how the music, and then other people are using it in terms of like selling shares and their royalties and their residuals. So I don't think it's that.
So we should have a new DRMs for the music NFT if we want to go that route.
I think that it depends on what you mean when you say music NFT. Like, what are you doing? Are you giving someone access to a download? Is it a streaming? Like what? Like you don't need to have with the prioritization with an NFT in the sense of art is on the visual ownership, right? But audio isn't visual. So if you're linking it up to a visual element, like what are you purchasing? So music is really a utility attached to an NFT or visual NFT, right? So I think that's the issue is like you really can't have it be unless you're using AI royalty free music. That's what you're going to start to see. Like there's a lot of AI generators for music where, like it's popping up and it's royalty free and you do what you want with it. And, but I think that's the issue is that audio is a utility attached to a visual, right? If you think about it, you're not selling the NFT as an audio essentially.
Yeah.
So what is that audio giving you? Where can you use it? What can you do with it? That's the part that and each one of those things in the music industry is a different set of rights. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's more complicated than we thought it would be. Yeah.
And honestly, there's a lot like Audius cropped up, and Audius has been like advertising artists and all these things. And I sent a user agreement to my attorney, and I was like, "What the fuck are they doing?" Like we saw some of our artists up there. I read their white paper. They're gonna get sued to high heaven. They keep raising money. I think they just raised another 15 million. They don't have the rights to be streaming that stuff. They're not paying the publishers, and you're gonna have these tech companies that purchase it because they've gotten their user base up, and again they're going to pay a slap on the wrist fine for all of the copyright infringements, but they are legally infringing on copyrights by posting all that music. They don't care. They're like, come sue me, so that's the issue is like it's not it's a lot of tech people being like music should be free or let's share music and not really understanding that there are protections in place.
And if you were to ask them like, let's share your software for free, they'd be like, no, it's mine.
Correct.
Like, buy it.
Open source your software. Exactly. Why? It should be free. You created something that everyone can use.
Yeah.
Can't we all use it? Why do you want us to pay for it? So yeah, you'll start to see more NFT projects crop up. It's just, you know, it's again with the Web3 Music Right groups that I launched. We just did our first. We've been having a weekly think tank, and then we did a first round table. We had all the major publishers, record labels, lawyers. We had PROs show up, and we kept it really intimate at about 30 to 40 people. We only allowed one delegate just so we could have this conversation, like this exact conversation where we're saying, you know, and it's different. It's another thing is that there's certain artists that are on publicly traded companies that are bigger that they don't acknowledge crypto. So if you have a Web3 program, they're not going to allow their artists to be on it because their publicly traded company isn't going to accept payments in crypto yet. So those are even like the deeper level things where you look at certain artists. So most of the artists you're seeing do these massive NFT drops are independents. They've gotten out of their label deals and they don't have to worry about, you know, a publicly traded company that owns their copyrights, you know, saying they can't do it.
Yeah.
So we will figure it out. It's just that it's again the new media, right?
Yeah. All right.
Wow.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's been. I don't want to hold you up. It's been a real pleasure, honestly. Like I didn't even know like you had so many hats.
That was impressive.
Yeah, for each of the hats that you wear, you have to come back on the show.
Yeah, we can do 10 shows. We can do more than 10 shows actually to each aspect. So.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Well, I'm happy to come on again. Where can I promote the show? Like I know we streamed it, but you mentioned it's also recorded.
Yeah, I'm going to give it. I'm going to give you the recording later on. Just have to optimize it because like the stream files are like huge.
Of course.
And then
why on the IP of it, or you know, it's open source and
check it out.
For this, honestly, give it to the world. Give it to the world. People need to know
depends on
that.
streaming or downloading, right?
Streaming or downloading. I didn't sing anything. If I sang something, you know, then we get into.
Oh yeah, I'll cut it out in the edit. I'll cut it out in the edit.
You'd have to.
Yeah, but basically our shows live on our LMS for now, soon the Web3 one. And apart from that, we give it to project and we're going to start, Twitch has it for 7 or 14 days. I never know with Twitch, but for 7 or 14 days, it's on VOD. Like you can just go back onto our channel and it's there.
Cool.
All right.
Awesome. Well, I'll give you some links as well. So if people want to find me, they can. Like, I'm very active on Instagram. I know that like Twitter's a bigger space, but Instagram is something where you can see all the organizations that I'm part of, and I post very regularly about a lot of events across like Females in Media Entertainment, Blue DAO, you know, so music industry, you know, and then my LinkedIn if you're more interested in the business side, you know, I have that.
Oh, if you want to be a bit more serious with you, we go with LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And
I think